So, so I was at a point in my career where those two things sounded very exciting to me. So I picked up from Rhode Island, where I had a perfectly great job at the University of Rhode Island, and moved halfway across the country to a place that I had never been before, which was Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we started working on our tasks. And so the left-hand side of this slide, the photo in the top corner with the OU flag represents our undergraduate bachelor's completion program. And how this program works, students start at the Tulsa Community College for the 2-year associate's degree, and then students who want to pursue the bachelor's degree come over to us and do the last 2 years of their bachelor's degree. So we started that back in 2006. I did it with a colleague, Dr. Libby Etheridge, which some of you may know because she's an Oklahoman. As Libby and I were out recruiting for students to join our undergraduate program, people started asking us, when are you going to start your graduate program? When are you going to start your doctoral program and your PhD program? And to tell you the truth, that wasn't even on the radar screen of me and Libby. We had our hands full doing the jobs that we were hired to do. And so we told people, oh, write your name down on this piece of paper and we'll get back to you when we can start the doctoral program. And without any trouble, any recruiting, any hard work, we had like 30 names on a list of people who wanted to get a PhD in early childhood. So we started that program in 2011, talking to the OU administration about how there was such a need for people to move into government roles or research roles or administrative roles, higher level roles in early childhood. So that's the picture on the bottom left. That was our first group of PhD students that we graduated in about 2015, 2016. As Amisha said, Dr. Young graduated from this program a couple years after we started the program. In the meantime, we've also started a master's program, which is an interdisciplinary program in childhood well-being. So this is a program that not only looks at early childhood education, but also looks at public policy and health and nutrition. And it's designed to cater to people who want to not go to a master's program to become a super early childhood teacher, but a person who's looking maybe after a couple years of being an early childhood teacher to expand their horizons and maybe become a program administrator, maybe move into state government roles, maybe think about pursuing the PhD and start on a research path. So it's a really broad-based program that might be a good step for some of you after you earn your bachelor's degree there at Langston. Okay, so that was the left-hand side of the screen. Now let me talk about the right-hand side of the screen. So as I said, the second part of my job was the opportunity to start a research group in collaboration with Head Start, Early Head Start, and other programs in the Tulsa community that actually offered services to young children and their families. And when we talk about doing early childhood research, some people not in our field wonder like what I do. Do I hook children up to electrodes? Like what do I do in terms of doing research on young children? So the pictures on the bottom show two of my colleagues, ECEI staff members, administering tests to young children as part of our research. So in the middle, there's Brittany, and she's giving an assessment called the PLS, Primary Language Scale, to a very young child. You can see that child is a toddler there. And then on the bottom right corner is Ashley administering a similar assessment to a slightly older child. But you can see by many people's standards, these are very young children to be getting one-on-one administration of standardized tests in a research setting. Many of the staff at the ECEI started out as early childhood teachers. And as they, thought about the next step in their career development, they wanted something outside the classroom. So this is a way that many people can apply their early childhood knowledge in a different type of setting. So because my staff often have a background as being an early childhood teacher, they're usually very good at building rapport with young children in these research settings. The top photo is one of my favorites of my group, and you can see somebody familiar in that photo to you. And every year, OU Tulsa has a Halloween costume competition, and we try to win it every year. So this was our idea one year, taking off on the Rosie the Riveter icon to say, like, we can research it. Us women, we can research that and find you the answer. We didn't win that year, but it was a great costume. And we always strive to win each year. So that's about my job. So it sounds like a pretty good job, and it is a good job, and I really love it and enjoy it. But like, how did I get here? And you all are students, and I remember when I was a student feeling sometimes confused and anxious and wondering, like, how am I going to forge a career? Like, what is a good path for me? And like, if I think back to when I was in high school, I would have never predicted I would have the job I have now. My goal in high school was to go to a 2-year nursing program so I could buy a car. That was kind of the horizon that I saw in front of me. And indeed, I started at the Community College of Beaver County, the icon there on the left, in a 2-year nursing degree. Quickly, I realized at this time, the nursing degree, you took college courses at the community college, but you also started a field experience right away in a hospital. And my first placement was at the geriatric center. So it was not uncommon for me to go to my placement and have a resident die. And that was very hard for me to digest as an 18-year-old. I wasn't prepared for that level of work at that time. But I thought, hang in there, next semester will be better, you'll get a different placement. And my second placement was in the Department of Pediatrics. And that turned out to be even harder because now it was not senior citizens who were dying, it was young children who were dying as I did my practicum placement. So as I reflected on that experience, it's like, I'm not certain I have the constitution to do this work, but I'm really fascinated with the child development courses I'm taking. So I kind of absorbed that information and thought about what I was interested in. And I started to be really interested in how children grow up to become the adults they are. And so I was interested in a combination of psychology and education. So I applied to and got accepted at a state college in Pennsylvania, Slippery Rock State College, that has a tradition of being a teacher preparation program. Lots of teachers in Pennsylvania get their degrees at Slippery Rock State College. And so I went to Slippery Rock and I did a double major between psychology, where I could get my child development information, and then education, where I could think about how that information is applied in the classroom. So I got my bachelor's degree. And again, I was kind of at a choice point. And it's like, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I'm so interested in this, I want to continue to study. And I went to Virginia Tech to pursue a master's in developmental psychology. Now, a master's in developmental psychology is a fabulous degree where you start to learn really sound research skills. But I really missed the world of practice. I missed being around young children and in classrooms with young children. So as I was finishing that master's in developmental psychology, I got really interested in the field of school psychology. And that involves administering assessments to children to help write an educational plan to guide their education. So I went over to Radford University, which was also in Virginia, and got a postmaster's degree in school psychology. And about the time I was finishing that degree, I really reflected on the fact that I was more and more interested in child development. Like, how do young children develop? Like, what is it that causes children that have seemingly the same experiences to turn out so different? And concurrently with that, at Radford, I was doing my final internship for my school psychology degree. And I was working in the southernmost county of West Virginia, which is coal mining country. And what I saw there was, it was really my first exposure to children growing up in poverty. There were children routinely at the schools where I worked who didn't have shoes to wear to school in the winter, or winter coats, or enough to eat. And that was really my first experience with that. And I learned about the pervasive negative developmental impact that poverty has on child development. And so that got me interested in going back to get my PhD and really focusing on like how children develop birth to 5 that sets them up for success or not. And as you'll see, that becomes like a theme throughout my career. But now, like, it took me until ages like 25, 28 to figure that out. So be easy on yourself if you're not certain where your career is going at this point, but have faith that experiences and what you're learning will help you shape it up to be something special that reflects you and your uniqueness. So that's the top row, how I got here in terms of going to school. And you can see I went to school a long time and have a lot of degrees. The bottom represents where I've worked. So after I got my PhD, my very first job was at Central Michigan University, which is a state university in the middle of Michigan. Then I had an opportunity to move to the University of Rhode Island, which I spent almost 20 years working in a Department of Family and Child Development, I think very similar to the department that you're in, where I taught courses that focused on the development of young children and also family studies. And I served as the director of the Child Development Center. We had an on-campus laboratory school for young children that we used for teaching and research purposes. And I was the director of that. Then, as you know, I've already told you, in 2006, I had the opportunity to move to OU to do what I'm doing now. So I tell you my career history. Again, I want you to be easy on yourself in terms of figuring up your career path, but also know that there's many opportunities out there. And I was touched by Amisha's introduction of me, of how I helped her navigate her career. And that's another kind of lesson I hope to share, is that don't be afraid to reach out and ask some of your former professors and mentors about career advice. I've done that with every switch I've done in terms of negotiating a salary, working conditions, different things. And so you develop and use those mentors that you have. All right, so I was attracted to my current job because of the research aspect of it. So the slide that you're seeing now is the cover of my research group's latest strategic plan. So as a research group, we make a plan every 3 to 5 years about what we hope to accomplish. And so the name of my research group is the Early Childhood Education Institute at the University of Oklahoma at Tulsa. And Amisha's already given you a little bit of insight into what we do. We're an applied research group. So what that means is we try to answer real questions posed about real children in real programs. We're not off in a lab just studying something for the purpose of writing a paper. We're really trying to focus on real world problems. Okay, so we're an applied research group focused on early childhood. And as you probably know, the definition of early childhood is from birth to age 8. And what we specialize in are longitudinal studies. So these are studies that study children over many years of their development. So you'll maybe start with a group of children when they're 3, age 3, and follow them through grade 3. So you're trying to figure out what explains their development over that span of time. So that's longitudinal work. We're also interested not only in child development over time, but we're also interested in studying the early childhood workforce. You know, teachers are really in the news these days because of even worse working conditions than what we as a field are accustomed to with all the COVID disruptions and stress. But we know that the adult is an important feature in any teaching interaction. They're really the instrument of the intervention that's being delivered. So for a long time, we acted like teachers just show up at the classroom and kind of like, do their thing. We always like to say, I borrow this from a colleague, Sherry Castle, that Amisha also knows, that teachers are people too. And teachers have stress in their lives, and they bring health problems and all kinds of things into the classroom that have an impact on how they interact with young children. So we try to study that and advocate for better working conditions for teachers of young children. And we're big advocates of we do a lot of assessments with young children, and some of those assessments are good and some frankly are bad. And we need to develop better measures in our field. And so that's a big thing, that where the field needs to move in the future is coming up with better measurements to reflect children's development. I already talked about, we work in partnership with community agencies and researchers from other fields to broaden our scope of understanding children. So that's what we do as a group. And I want to give my group credit. This is one of our most recent group pictures before the pandemic struck, and we no longer are this close to one another in proximity. But I talk about my research group, but it's really the efforts of all these people and other people over time who've contributed to the products and the work that we've been able to share in terms of our research findings. So you'll see in this picture, a lot of people, when I look at this photo, I see a lot of people who, like I said, started out their careers as early childhood teachers. And then when the opportunity to work with our research group came, they switched over to research. I also see people that come to us with a background more in like statistics or some of the advanced analyses that we use. But it takes the efforts of a lot of people to collect information, analyze the information, write papers, and get the research findings out there. So I always want to thank my group, because everybody on this, everybody pictured here really contributes to our team effort to get new research information out. So when I think about early childhood researchers, I always like to think about it is that we share a common goal with other people who work in early childhood or care for young children. So teachers certainly care for and work with young children. Parents and caregivers certainly care about young children. Program leaders care about young children, and family advocates also care about young children and families. So we all kind of share this common goal of positive outcomes for young children. That's what we're all working to achieve. Researchers just bring a different lens and a different toolbox to that task. And so what I hope to do today is talk a little bit about how we brought our research toolbox to some different projects, and what those projects involved and what they resulted in terms of positive outcomes for young children. So when I was talking about my own career development, I talked about the fact that my job as a school psychologist in the southernmost county of West Virginia, Mercer County, West Virginia, was my first exposure to children growing up in low levels of poverty. So what I noticed in those children, and I worked with the youngest children in Mercer County schools, was they showed up at the kindergarten door having very different levels of skills. And that's what this slide shows. So the slide is not my work. It's a slide put together by the US Department of Education. And I want to just walk you through this slide. So on the vertical axis, over on the left-hand side, you'll see reading IRT scores. So this is a reading test. The chart shows how children performed on a reading test. Across the bottom horizontal axis, you'll see you'll see fall of kindergarten, spring of kindergarten, spring of first grade, spring of third grade, and spring of fifth grade. Okay, so this is a longitudinal study of how children are doing in reading, with the assessments occurring the first fall when children enter kindergarten, and then spring thereafter through grade 5. So what these researchers did when they administered that reading assessment in fall of kindergarten, they gave it to a bunch of kids, and kids did differently on it. And they divided those children up into 10 groups based on their performance. So the black line at the bottom are the 10% of kids that performed the lowest, achieved the lowest score on the reading test. And that purple line that's hard to see at the very top are the 10% of kids that scored the highest. Okay, what do you see as time unfolds through kindergarten, first grade, third grade, and fifth grade? Like, what's an observation or a conclusion that you can draw from this? You can put it in the chat.
Their test scores are going up.
The test scores are going up, so everybody is getting better at reading. Certainly that's true. If you start low, where do you stay?
Yeah, it's like
Low.
Yeah, if you start low, you stay low. So if you start in that black line in fall of kindergarten, look where you are at the very end on the right-hand side. You're still probably in the lowest reading group. And if you start in that purple line, you start high, those kids stay high, right? None of the lines cross, which means how you enter at kindergarten is predictive of how you're going to do at first grade, third grade, and fifth grade. And the lines get further apart a little bit, not extremely. Yeah, the lines get further apart.
I have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
It might be off topic. Let me know if it is, but hypothetically speaking, let's just say that the black line ends up going up. Like, what would that mean for the child necessarily? Like, if this at the bottom, like, let's just say it ended up changing places with the blue line.
Right.
What
So
would
if the
that
lines
mean?
crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. What that would mean is they were gaining reading skills faster and then like superseded or did better than the kids in the next higher group. So what this is showing is the kids are kind of maintaining their rank order among all those peers. So if you start low, you stay low. You start high, you stay high, and there's nobody crossing over groups. But what you ask, if those lines did cross, that's what it would mean. It would mean they were kind of like catching up and maybe surpassing the kids that used to read better than them.
Okay.
So what this got me interested in, based on my personal experiences when I was a school psychologist, and this, I'm like, heck, kids are showing up at kindergarten door already showing an achievement or opportunity gap. So we need to start early. Waiting to kindergarten is like too late. We need to be doing something sooner and investigating and understanding this earlier in children's development. Whoops. Did I mess up my slides?
We can see it. You're back on the
Okay.
presentation.
Whoops. I'm having a hard time with my mouse today. All right, so I'm now interested in what happens before kindergarten, because I'm convinced whatever you're doing at age 5 is going to predict a lot of your school achievement over time. So that brings me to another really famous study. And this is a slide that is from a study by 2 researchers, Hart and Risley. And what they did is they sent researchers into the homes of young children. And look at the bottom axis. These children were very young. They started when the children were 10 months of age, and they did it until the children were 36 months of age. So basically from age 1 to age 3. And what they did is they counted the number of vocabulary words that children heard. And look at this graph. So that blue line on top represents the number of words that children in professional families heard. The green line are working class families, and the red line are families living in poverty. So the conclusion that one draws from this is that the experiences of children growing up in different economic situations, from poor to wealthy, have very different experiences. Now, in a way, that's not surprising. I mean, we know that from just living in the world and looking around at the people that we know. But to think about it starting to have an impact on the number of vocabulary words that children at this young age know and how that shapes their later academic achievement is really stunning. So for me as a graduate student at the time that this study was done, this just captivated me about the power of early childhood education to really impact young children and their ultimate development. So that's a kind of a story about the achievement or opportunity gap starts very early. Now this slide shows the same thing, but it's a little bit harder to comprehend. It's a little bit not intuitive. So what this shows is children's performance on the Bailey Cognitive Assessment. So this is an assessment used with very young children between higher and lower income infants at 9 and 24 months of age. Now, the very top of this graph, like this area up here, represents where average is. And what we're seeing is children who are, this is the mean score for those above the poverty line. And what we're seeing is children who are growing up in poverty by 9 months of age are showing less performance than their wealthier colleagues. And by 24 months of age, this grows to quite a large difference. So the conclusion here is that at birth, children are all very capable of learning unless they have a diagnosed disability or a health condition. It's the situations in which children find themselves, either enriching or not, that really have a big shaping influence on their early development. Again, fueling my excitement about the power of early childhood to get children started on a good path. These are things that we as a country can do things about. We can improve children's early childhood experiences. So these studies were percolating along and people were talking about them. And then there were two very important studies that came down the pike that have really influenced the field of early childhood to this day. And so then the question became, you know, is what Diane is concluding and other researchers concluding right? Can we structure early childhood programs so that they help children achieve better in terms of school subjects? And so past research suggests the answer is yes. And these two very important studies, excuse me, the first one is the Perry Preschool Project, the first bullet there. Now this study was started in 1962, and they are still following these children who are now 60-year-old adults. So this is a longitudinal study that is following a group of people over time. They started in 1962 with 123 Black preschoolers who were growing up in poverty. And they have assessed those children roughly every other year their entire lives. And what they found when the children were in school, the children started school. I forgot to tell you a very important part of the study. So they had a group of like 300 kids who wanted to come to this school. They couldn't accommodate all of those children, so they randomly picked who got to go to school. So there's a group of kids that get the Perry Preschool, and then there's a group of kids who don't get it. And they did whatever kids did back in 1962 in terms of staying home with family members or whatever. Now, when they compared these two groups over time, they found that the kids who went to the high quality preschool had a leg up. They did better on early achievement tests. They showed up at kindergarten, scoring higher on a pre-reading test. Over the course of their life, they had things like higher rates of high school graduation, higher rates of attending and finishing college, higher rates of successful marriages, lower rates of incarceration. They had better job stability. They had higher incomes. So it seems that starting life with a very high quality preschool experience had lifelong consequences, positive consequences for these children. So that was one study. The second study is the Abecedarian project. And it started a decade later in 72. So these people are now in their 50s and they're still following them. So this study got started because there was a growing hypothesis in the research field that you get better results the earlier you start. So that interventions in infancy or toddlerhood would be more powerful than those in preschool, when the achievement gap or the opportunity gap has already started to have a negative impact. So the Abecedarian study focused on starting in infancy. And again, these children were growing up in poverty. And again, they followed them over the course of their life, and they found good academic achievement results. Again, better rates of high school graduation, better rates of college attendance. They found all these good positive benefits. But the most surprising benefit that was published relatively recently is that last bullet there. Findings at age 40 show men who had the high quality preschool had better cardiac health than peers in the control group. So how is it that having a high quality infant, toddler, and preschool experience can influence your health? And that question there is one of the big questions we're currently researching in the field. Those connections between health and education. Like, what is it? We know that's a finding. We have no idea of the processes that explain that finding. So that is an open question in the field right now that researchers like me are trying to figure out. So that brings me to this book, which was a very influential book in the field and in my own development. So this book, As the Twig is Bent, was published in like the late 80s. And what it did is it looked at studies like the Perry Preschool Project and the Abecedarian study. There were about 11 to 18 of these studies being conducted across the US. And it pulled all those findings together in this book that made a compelling argument that what children experience birth to 5 has a big impact on their later development. Now, I'll stop here to say that from today's perspective, these studies are criticized. So I'm going to go back a slide and talk to you about some of the critiques. Okay, by today's standard, 123 children in a study or 111 children in a study is considered a small study. Today, studies are done mostly with thousands of children in experimental groups, not hundreds. So the study is critiqued from that perspective. The study is also critiqued because it was all Black children that were in these studies. And the problem with that is that almost all the researchers were white. And all the tools that were used were designed and developed using white children. So there's a question of how accurate these tools were with a different demographic group. And I'll foreshadow again something else I'm going to say later. That's still a problem in our field. We need more researchers of color to come into the field to help update the field so that it accurately reflects like all of our citizens of the United States. So those are some critiques. So that brings me to some current work that is out there in the early childhood field in both practice and research called EduCare. And In Oklahoma, we have 4 EduCare centers in Tulsa, and there's one in Oklahoma City. So given you're relatively close to Oklahoma City, you may know about it, or you may know about the ones in Tulsa. But I'm going to talk about EduCare because EduCare is really the modern version of the Abecedarian project, acted out in modern times. Okay, so let's see, why won't my slide go forward? There we go. So let me talk a little bit about EduCare. So it's a comprehensive early childhood education program that involves not only early childhood education for the children, but there's health monitoring, there's mental health services, there are family support workers on staff who are like social workers and work with the family about any needs that they may have. It's designed to serve young children birth through age 5 who live in poverty. The first one was developed in Chicago around the year 2000. And what happened to cause the development of EduCare is that there was this rich person, Irving Harris, who had a foundation, and he noticed this failing Head Start center on the south side of Chicago. So Head Start is our federal government's program for young children growing up in poverty. They provide a part-year, part-day service for children. So some of you may know about Head Start. So there was a Head Start center in Chicago that was doing really poorly. And Irving Harris said, what can I do to turn this program around? What can I do to strengthen this program? And so he started to convene people to have meetings and talk about what to do. And he also got Chicago Public Schools involved. And so together, what they decided to do was to implement a very comprehensive and like full impact Head Start program. So Head Start from its beginnings was designed to be a comprehensive family and child development program, like a 2-generation program, focusing and supporting not only the children, but their families as well. Now, what's wrong with Head Start is that the federal funding level for the program doesn't support all the program goals. So not enough money is put into it for it to be truly the effective intervention that it needs to be. What EduCare does is it gets people who have money to give, and they fund the other half of Head Start or early Head Start that the federal funds do not cover. So they built on Head Start, early Head Start as a foundation, and they entered more of what we call a dose. So instead of a part-year, part-day program, EduCare is our full day, 7 to 8 hours a day, 12-month program. The teachers, there are more degreed teachers that work in EduCare than in a Head Start. There's more professional development, and there's a partnership with somebody like me, a researcher who collects information and feeds that back to the program, and they use that information to fine tune and strengthen the program. So that's basically what EduCare is. Now, EduCare started in Chicago in 2000, and you know what happened? Other billionaires got interested in what that billionaire in Chicago was doing. And so at every one of these red dots, there are now 25 EduCares spread across the country. And at every one of these red dots, the partner is probably somebody you've heard about. So up there in Seattle, the partner is Bill Gates. Let's see, which other one do I know about? In Nebraska, the partner is Warren Buffett, who's a pretty famous billionaire. In Tulsa, our guy is George Kaiser. And the one in Oklahoma City, it's a foundation whose name I'm blocking on right now. But in every one of these red dots, somebody has come forward to say, I'm willing to foot the bill for the other half of the program that the federal government doesn't pay for. So it makes it a better, stronger, more complete program. And at every one of these red dots, every one of these centers, there's somebody like me who's a researcher that we've decided to work together to collect common information on the children across the network so that we can track the children's development and think about how they're doing and why they're doing how they're doing. All right, so in today's world, you may have heard of logic models, because if you're doing an intervention or a program, this basically outlines what you think your program is doing. So Educare's logic model, they have on the left what they call core features. And so they use data to inform the professional development that the Educare staff gets, so that they can implement high quality teaching practices with the young children and intensive family engagement with the families. That working together in the context of strong leadership produces strong parent-child relationships and school-family partnerships and parenting support, so that the child is getting learning support at school and at home. And the goals, the outcomes they're trying to achieve are increased student achievement and kindergarten readiness, and good outcomes for families and children. So that's what Educare promotes as what they're trying to accomplish through their work with young children and families. So as I said, each Educare has somebody like me who's their research partner. And what we do is across all Educare sites, we have common measures or assessments we give to the young children. We're trained by the same people, and we administer these assessments on the same timelines. We have researchers at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Center at the University of North Carolina who act as our quality control, and they check our work to make sure we're doing it accurately. And each site can add local measures beyond what is mandated as part of the network. So what this results in is a very large, diverse sample of children across our country. So each year we collect information on over 3,000 children. And jotted on the bottom part of this slide are just some of the demographic characteristics of the families and children that we study in our Educare study. So you'll see that, you know, about half are single parents. If you look at the very last bullet, about 45% of the children are Black, not Hispanic, 38 Hispanic, 11% white, and 8% biracial. So it is a large, diverse sample compared to those previous studies that I talked about that in today's perspective have been critiqued for focusing only on one sociodemographic group. So in Tulsa, as I said, we have 4 Educare schools, and the schools are really nice and beautiful physical plants. The 4 schools are, the photographs are here. They're all very modern buildings, and each of the schools serve about 120 children each. And the focus in Tulsa is on birth through age 3, because most of the 4-year-olds go to the public school 4-year-old program. And Amisha, you worked at Educare 3, which is the 3rd photo over, right?
Yes. Couldn't find my mute, but yes, ma'am.
And so this is just like another photo of Educare of a teacher and a child in terms of kind of what the interactions would look like. So I see that somebody has their hand up, a question.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I did a little bit of some research on the website, and I did come across the Educare implementation study, and I had a couple questions. Hold on, give me a second. Let me find them.
Could I ask you to hold them until I talk about that study? Because I'm going to talk about it. All right, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
So this first slide, so Educare says it's a high quality program. And so I think in this world, you just can't go around saying you're high quality without proving it, right? Like you say you're high quality, let's prove it. And so in the early childhood research field, we have ways to observe in classrooms to document if high quality practices are being implemented or not. And so this slide, if you look at the very top, it says ITERS, ITERS. So that's the Infant Toddler Environment Rating Scale. So that's an assessment that somebody's created where my trained observers go into a classroom and spend half a day and rate everything that happens. And this is a standardized tool that's used across the country. So if you look again at the bars, you'll see on the far right are the Educare ITERS results from 2015. And you can see on this 7-point scale, they scored a 5.7. which that is in the good to high quality range of classrooms. Now, look at where these other people have scored. So Baby Faces is a study of early Head Start. They scored a 3.7, which is like the mediocre range, moderate range. Okay, so Educare looks good in terms of documenting it's a high quality program for infants and toddlers. The next one is the similar measure, ECERS. Oops, excuse me. The next one is the similar measure, ECERS, which is for preschoolers. And again, looking at my chart there, you can see Educare, their measured quality is higher than FACES. That first blue bar is Head Start. Okay, so the money that's being put into Educare is allowing them to offer a higher quality program to the young children and families that are enrolled. Okay, so just on the face of that, we would predict that that should lead to good child outcomes, right? Like if we have a high quality program based on previous research and just common sense, if you expose children to good things, they should do better. And indeed, we've done a study to look at how the kids are doing. And so this is the Educare implementation study. So let me talk you through this chart. So where I'm going to start is with the yellow bar. Okay, see that yellow bar? Now, if you look down at the bottom axis, you'll see that this is a measurement of children's language that we took at age 4. These kids enrolled in Educare at age 4 and stayed 1 year. So that yellow bar, their score when they entered Educare was 88.6. And over the course of a year, they grew to a score of 93.2 on a norm referenced standardized measure of child language. Okay. On this assessment, the national average of all social demographic groups, rich kids, poor kids, in between kids, the average score is 100. So growing to a score of 93 is a good outcome after 1 year of going to an Educare school. Okay, that's a good outcome. Now look at the very bottom orange line on this chart. Okay, same logic for the orange line, but these are dual language learners. These are children who showed up at Educare at age 4 knowing very little English, mostly Spanish-speaking children. Okay, often the children of recent immigrants. Okay, these children, look how they grew. That's a very steep line, meaning lots of growth. But look where they, after 1 year, they grew a lot. But when they exited Educare to go on to elementary school, they're scoring only like 83, 84. And on a test where the average, national average is 100, a score of 83 is way below average. So if you think about back to that very first chart I showed you, these are going to be the kids that start low and stay low. Okay, we want to get kids up to starting higher so that they have a better chance of ending higher at the end of their schooling career. Okay, so those are those two short bars. 1 year of Educare attendance, great outcomes for English speakers. Spanish speakers learn a lot, but they're still leaving behind their national peers. All right, look at the two longer lines. Okay, the logic here is a little bit trickier. So the gray line, those kids entered Educare at or before 2 years of age but the first time we measure them and show it on this chart is at age 3. Okay, so that gray bar, the very first time we measure these kids who entered Educare at 2, at 3, they're scoring 93.4. And they're ending up with a score of basically 98, just 2 points shy of that national average. So when these kids exit Educare to go to elementary school, they're starting probably in the middle of that pack from that first slide that I showed you. So they're starting kindergarten at a better place, which makes us predict they'll end their schooling at a better place. Now, there's something else important I want you to notice about this. Okay, the very first time we measure these kids their score is 93 at age 3, but the kids who entered at age 4, their very first score was 88. So what does this tell you about that achievement opportunity gap? It grows over time if there's no intervention. The kids who started Educare earlier never dropped as low as similar kids who didn't start Educare till later. Okay, so this result kind of supports the conclusion that starting earlier is better, and that longer enrollment in early childhood programs tends to have better effects. Okay, the blue line shows Spanish-speaking children, same logic. Okay, so let me take the question that somebody had on the Educare implementation study. Is it Keela?
Kayla.
Kayla. All right, Kayla, I'm ready for your
Yes.
question.
Oh, okay, awesome. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm at work. But my questions, well, they're questions, but they tie together. In your own words, how would you describe how implementation of the Educare model contributes to program quality, and what differences have you noticed or observed yourself in the quality?
There's many, and Dr. Young could also chime in on this, but I think that the teachers have better resources and materials than are often found in, say, community-based childcare centers. There's ongoing professional development where there's somebody who's known as the mentor teacher, whose job it is not to run a classroom of children, but to observe their other teachers and work with them to do better in their teaching job. So I would say there's more professional development, there's better and more resources, and I think the full day, full year programming really makes a difference. And if we think about something like Head Start, that's half day, part year, that's like taking half an aspirin when you need a whole aspirin. You know, it's just not the dose. Dr. Young, would you add anything?
I think I agree with everything that you said, and even just the quality of the interactions between the teachers and the children. We've been talking with Chris at E3, and so we're actually trying to coordinate a field trip for our students to go there. And so I think once you guys get a chance to see it, you guys have had experience going into the public school. Some of you guys have gone to some of the area childcare centers, but I think once you get into Educare and you actually see that it's a full curriculum, they have lesson plans, they have planned activities for the children, and the way that they interact with the children from the time they get there until they leave is totally different than what you would sometimes see in some of our community-based programs.
Did you have another question?
Yes, but it was about a different project. So I'm not sure if you're going to talk about that one, but when it does come up, or if it does come up, I'll talk about that one.
Okay, that's a deal. All right, so I'm going to continue on. And so those results I just showed you, we shared with a national audience through publications. to talk about the impact of high quality early childhood education. But in my role as the local partner evaluator, I also share data internally with my program partners. And they use that information to fine tune the curriculum, to schedule professional development, to decide a lot of things about the school. So we share it, not only, we share the results outward to the general public, but we also use the results within Educare to help strengthen it. And I just wanted to show you this quickly because this is an example of, on the left, a child assessment dashboard. So all those assessments that I just talked about in terms of like doing a national level publication to tell our results to the world, we would give those results back to the classroom teacher on a child by child basis so that the teacher could use the results in his or her work with the young children. So that dashboard on the left, each row of that is a different child, and we color code it so that it's easy to read. So a child that has gray, they're kind of developing as expected. The child who has green is doing better than expected. And the child who has red, that's like a red flag. And the teacher really needs to key into that child and probably do more individualization and support for that child in terms of helping to support their development. On the right, I have a chart that shows one of our classroom observation tools. And this is my observer who goes into the classroom and observes for half a day, would fill this out. And based on like what we know is good practice, the teacher gets feedback that they're strong in some things, which is the purple. They are building, like developing skills in the things that are blue. And the green are emerging skills that they probably need more support from their mentor coach to develop stronger classroom skills. So we give information back not only about the children, but on what's going on with the adults in the classroom that maybe they could do better at. So if you think about Educare's logic model, using data to offer high quality teaching practices, which leads to good child outcomes. That's what we're trying to achieve. So Amisha, I noticed that like I'm an hour in.
Yes.
So I think what I'll do is talk really quickly about some other studies just to say like what it was and what it produced. So this next study, the Educare RCT, and RCT stands for Randomized Clinical Trial. And that's like the Perry Preschool Project and the Abecedarian studies, where kids were randomly assigned to get it or not. And what random assignment does for you as a researcher, it allows you to conclude with more confidence that what you're studying, the Educare treatment, actually produced the results you're seeing. And it wasn't because like all the parents who were very motivated got in the study and the parents who weren't motivated didn't, and that would cause the difference. So this is considered the gold standard of proving your program works. So after we presented the results from the implementation study, that graph that I just talked you through with the gray, purple, yellow, and orange lines, once we presented that, we got criticized that it wasn't an RCT. So we got together and got ourselves organized and did an RCT. And basically the RCT has shown similar results, that after exposure to Educare, children demonstrate better language skills and fewer behavior problems. And parents were more engaged in their parent-child interactions. So that's what this study showed. We've also done work with CAP Tulsa, which is the large Head Start provider in Tulsa. And we've done work on something called the OECP, Oklahoma Early Childhood Program. And the goal of this program was to open up more higher quality infant toddler childcare placements across the state of Oklahoma. So the state legislature provided funding through the Oklahoma Department of Ed for communities to expand and enhance their infant toddler programming. So we were hired as the evaluators on that. And basically what we found is that when given money, providers improve the quality of their infant toddler programming, and the children did better on tests of their language and early math. And so I'm very proud to say that result was instrumental in this going from a pilot program that the state was funding to a hard funded program. So this is part of what our state supports now in the state of Oklahoma. So for me, this is an example of research informing policy in a very good way, that we have now expanded high quality infant toddler slots across the state of Oklahoma as a result of partially my research, but partially lobbying and other people telling stories about how the program really helped their family. We're doing a longitudinal study to look at children from age 3 to grade 4 to try to figure out the boost that children get from attending a high quality program. Sometimes that boost fades once they're in elementary school. There's a very prominent study in the news right now, the Tennessee pre-K study, that showed major fade out of the boost that children initially got from a good preschool over the elementary year. So we're doing this study to try to figure out what prevents the fade, what sustains the boost, what keeps the boost going. So we're looking in very much detail at what goes on in classrooms. So that's this study. It's still going on, so I don't have any results to share with you. It will end next year. As I mentioned, we also are interested in teachers, because teachers are the instrument of early childhood education. And this is an interdisciplinary project that's really by two of my colleagues, Dr. Kyung Kwan and Dr. Sherry Castle. Got federal funding to run a study to study teacher well-being. And so they're looking at everything, all aspects of teachers. Like we talk about the whole child and how that's important. We're talking about the whole teacher. So what is their physical development like? Their mental health, their professional self, and how can schools better support more aspects of teachers' lives to help them do their jobs. So you can see that has real practical implications. So all of this early childhood research, a big conclusion we can draw is that many studies like those produced by my research group and other groups across the country who are doing similar work, we really see that the earlier the investment in high quality programming, the greater the return. And I'm very proud to say that this slide was put together by James Heckman. You look at the bottom, and he's a guy who's won the Nobel Prize in economics. So this isn't like an early childhood educator tooting our own horn. This is somebody from economics studying the cost effectiveness of implementing early childhood programming versus waiting till later. Think about that saying, as the twig is bent. Young twigs are easier to bend. Like an older tree, you can't budge. So it's the same principle applied to this.
Oh,
I mentioned, go ahead.
Oh, I just said that's me.
I mentioned we do what's called dissemination, and that's like sharing our findings with others. We do it through publications, which are often read only by other researchers, and we know that. So we try to influence our research colleagues to push the science more, each step we learn more. But we know that only researchers read research papers. So we put our results out in what's called briefs. So those are usually 1 or 2 page summaries of a research study. And we do ones that are oriented for policymakers. And we do ones that are oriented for families in terms of what they can be doing with their young children at home. And then we do a variety of presentations, again, to both professional and general public audiences to talk about our work. So I hope through this presentation, I've convinced you that research is a great career to pursue. And you can have a lot of impact through a research career. When I think back over my career, I've seen research change or create public policies. So the whole growth of pre-K for 4-year-olds, that was not present before 20 years ago. And it's only through research that now pre-K is prominent in about 30 of our 50 states across the US. Infant toddler programming has increased in availability and in the seriousness with which it's implemented, understanding that what we do with young children makes a difference for their short-term and long-term development. And I even think early childhood as a field has been really developed through our research. When I got out of college, like 1,000 years ago, to say you were an early childhood educator meant you taught kindergarten. That was generally the youngest age group that were receiving any services outside the home. Now, when you say you're an early childhood educator, you could be working with children birth through age 3, birth through age 5, birth through age 8. The whole field has grown up in the time that, in the 30 years that I've spent as a researcher in the field. I think we can say we've improved outcomes for children, and the results I shared with you today from the EduCare implementation study, the EduCare randomized control trial, and we're doing our own EduCare follow-up study in Tulsa with just our Tulsa RCT kids, Amisha, and I'm just about ready to release that report, and we have some exciting results. I'll put that out there as a teaser. We didn't find fade out, I'll say that. And we also inform other research, and a trend in the field that leads me to trends is more interdisciplinary work, that we have to get out of our education silo, our health silo, our mental health silos, that, you know, all of that needs to come together to produce research that really answers the hard questions we have now in our society about children and families. So interdisciplinary research is growing. Team science, where it's no longer one researcher running a research program, it's a whole team of researchers working together, often representing other disciplines. And the community embedded part, which makes you do research that answers real questions about real people, as opposed to just abstract ideas that are born in a lab. So that's the way the research field is going. I think that in terms of topics, we've learned that not one size fits all, and that those good results we get for children, not everybody has the same good result. And when we do those classroom observations, even though we act like every child in the classroom gets the same effect from the classroom, you know, thinking about classrooms you've been in, there are kids who have better experiences and worse experiences, kids that mesh with the teacher, kids that clash with the teacher. And those are two very different types of experiences that shape your development. So we're really focused on how can we better capture those day-to-day, minute-to-minute processes that are going on in classrooms that really make the difference. There's a huge focus on equity. As I said towards the beginning, a realization that most researchers are white, most research protocols and procedures and tools have been developed with white samples, that we really need to diversify, and the field is really aware of that. So, as with the need for a more diverse workforce, including researchers. So again, I'm saying to you, consider research as a career. It's very exciting. It helps you discover things that really help your communities. And there's a real push to get people of color into the research field. So there's lots of opportunities for fellowships and mentorships and opportunities. And every time I see one of those, I shoot it off to Amisha. So hopefully she's nagging you about them, because there's really great opportunities that I hope you take advantage of, because we really need you for the research to get better.
Yeah, Diane, I was going to tell you, we actually have one of our students that submitted an application for the infant brain, the baby lab in Dallas. So we got everything submitted. So keep those invitations coming, proposals, opportunities, and we'll certainly share them with our students.
Well, that's excellent. Good luck on that. So like my invitation, join us in saying we can research it. We can figure it up. It's a good career. And like I said, it's really an exciting time in the field where we're recognizing our limitations and really challenging ourselves to grow. So again, I want to thank my research group. I thank you all, and I'll answer any other questions.
I saw so many familiar.
Thank you.
Thank you. All
I
right.
have a quick question.
Uh-huh.
So as a childhood researcher, what are the challenges that you guys come across?
I would say that a challenge we have are the measurement tools. I've been in the field about 30 years, and when I was in graduate school, I remember people critiquing some tools, and we're still using some of those tools 30 years later. People haven't fixed them. So that's a challenge. And I also think that when we approach some programs about doing research with them, they turn us away thinking that children will be put off by us, or that we're there to like show their flaws or their weaknesses. But we try to reassure people that like we're in this because we want good outcomes for children, the same thing you want. We want to apply our toolbox to help and support you the best we can. So I think sometimes the attitude that researchers are like out to like get you or show your weaknesses, I think that really harms us. And I think by like a better attitude about working together, we could make more progress.
Thank you.
There was another question in the chat. It says, does Educare have plans to address the childcare deserts in communities?
Yeah, childcare deserts are a very challenging thing. And so what Educare has done, and I would say Head Start and Early Head Start have done this too. There's a program called Child Care Partnership Programs, where programs like Educare, Head Start, and Early Head Start that tend to have more resources than community-based childcares, they partner with a community-based childcare to share their professional development and to offer some other supports. So for instance, I know the Oklahoma City Educare is part of a child care partnership, as are the ones in Tulsa. So that's one way that they're trying to partner with community-based child cares and share some of their resources. I would say that, Amisha, you'll have to help me about Oklahoma City if there's something similar. I'm assuming there is. So in Tulsa, we have a group called Impact Tulsa. And they're a group of researchers that look at information about food deserts, childcare deserts, and then they share that information with city leaders so that when decisions are being made about where new schools are being built or where the bus lines are going to go or whatever, that kind of information is handy for policymakers and leaders to have and think about when they're thinking about improving services to the citizens of their city or county. Amisha, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't know. I still don't know a whole lot about the landscape of Oklahoma City. So I'm not sure. I was wondering if the Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness, if they did similar work, but that was the one organization that stood out.
Yeah, so the OPSR, Oklahoma Partnership for School Readiness, they very much keep track of things like childcare deserts and write grants to try to get money to build new programs or expand programs. So yes, that's another organization that would be good for the students to become familiar with, because they do a lot of policy-oriented work in Oklahoma around early childhood.
Yeah.
Somebody asked what a child care desert is.
Thank you.
So a child care desert.
I was actually curious on that as well.
Yeah, so that term desert means like there's nothing there. So when we say childcare desert, it would be an area, a geographical area where there's no childcare facilities. Or a food desert is a geographical area where there's no grocery stores where people can buy food. So it's a desert is used to mean the lack of whatever it is, childcare desert, food desert.
Yeah, and I would definitely say we're experiencing that here at Langston. Now that we no longer have our lab school, we've really been impacted by the lack of childcare for our students and just in the Langston community.
Right. And so you have a perfect example of how that probably has resulted in some students not being able to continue,
Absolutely.
some employees not being able to continue. So these lack of resources really have impacts on, again, real people in their real life.
I think there may have been, there was one other.
Yeah, there's a question about Cap Tulsa and us going out to do the classroom observations. We do those, I think, on an annual basis for the people participating in the OECP program run by Cap. And so this person notes that utilizing the class and the QSET, which are two observation tools that I didn't talk about. I only talked about the ones called the ITERs and the ECHRs. So the ITERs and the ECHRs, the infant toddler environment rating scale and the early childhood environment rating scale, they're like the grandmother and grandfather of classroom observation tools. They were the first ones around that were developed. As goes in research, they were critiqued and their limitations were pointed out. And then another group of researchers from the University of Virginia developed the CLASS, which stands for Classroom Assessment Scoring System. So these researchers, benefiting from the work on the ECHRs and the ITERs and the critiques and newer research, said the active ingredient in classrooms is really teacher-child interaction. So we're going to design our classroom observation quality measure around the nature of those teacher-child interactions. So then that was predominant for a while. And now the class is being critiqued because it's not showing strong relationships to child outcomes. So there's a disconnect between what the class is measuring and the outcomes we want to document in children. So that tool is getting critiqued. So then things like the QSET were born. It's a newer tool and it really looks intently at teacher-child interactions with infants and toddlers. And the QSET, I was just emailing with somebody about it today, because I was one of the first people outside the developers of the QSET to get trained on it. And I gotta tell you, it was at the limit of my cognitive capacity to keep all the things you were looking for in a classroom in your brain, looking around the classroom with all the activity of a classroom and then record that. I got reliable on that measure, which means I was like certified to be a trained QSET observer, but boy, it was hard. Amisha, I can't remember if you did that tool or not.
I didn't. That was right before I got ready to transition to EduCare. But I do remember you guys talking about the stress of just trying to get reliable.
Yeah, and like I said, the picture of my research group is up here. And like I said, I give everybody in this group credit because these predominantly women, we have one man with our group now, are experts at going into classrooms and using these tools and observing. So they're very sophisticated of observers of what goes on in classrooms and expert at assessing the young children. So they're just a great staff. Other questions?
I was just looking at some of the questions that my class submitted, and I don't know whose question this is, but I'm going to ask it because I think this is a really good one. They all submitted great questions, but two that stood out to me that haven't been asked yet is, what is the biggest progress you've seen out of your years of working with children?
I think this relates, my answer is going to relate to another question I saw in the chat. And that is, I think the offering of universal pre-K, you know, when I started in the field, there was no such thing as pre-K for 4-year-olds. The youngest children started formal schooling was kindergarten. And in fact, across the US at that time, many kindergartens were not full day. The research showing that starting earlier makes a difference in children's development led to some states, and Oklahoma was a leader in this area. We were like the second or third state to offer pre-K. And colleagues of mine that work at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. were engaged to do research on the early implementation of pre-K in Oklahoma, and they found great results. Like kids left pre-K more prepared for kindergarten, and they have also followed those kids over time and find that kids are doing better in middle school and high school. So that research really informed the policy field. And I think now there's pre-K in something like 32 states. So it's way more common now, but 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. So like in Oklahoma, we've had universal but voluntary pre-K since, the 90s. And when I talk about like what a big deal that is, people in Oklahoma, your average citizen tends not to even recognize it because it's just been part of the landscape in Oklahoma for so long. But any other state you go to, there's not universal pre-K. So that's part of President Biden's plan, is to roll that out. And I'm actually a proponent of that because I think the research really supports it.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I know that you gather the research and everything, but like, are you all hands-on with the children that you like research? Like after you see what the problem is there a way that you can help them, or do you all help them, or do you just like strictly research and then, you know?
So I would say two things. So my research staff, all those women that you saw there in that group photo, they go into classrooms and they observe, or they work with a teacher to take individual children to like a separate office and administer the tests. And then we tally all the results and we look at the results for individual children. And that one slide I showed you that had that color-coded thing by child, if there's a child that has a lot of developmental red flags, my staff will say to the teacher, like, does this jive with what you're seeing in the classroom? Like, you know, based on how this kid performed, I'm worried about him. Like, what are you seeing in the classroom? And so sometimes that can initiate like a referral for special ed, more diagnostic testing. Generally, that's the interaction we have with children, is like either being part of the classroom and observing what's going on, or assessing them one by one, and then just conveying any frightening results to the teacher or the program administrator. So that's more or less our role.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. Go ahead, Jaden.
Oh, how many projects, like research projects, are you guys currently working on, and like what are they?
Okay, so we have our Educare work that's going on since 2006. We've had a partnership with them. Since 2007, we've been working with CAP Tulsa on a project with them and the Oklahoma Early Childhood Program. We're doing the RCT follow-up of Educare. We're doing the Big Seed study. And I would say we have 5 major projects going on right now. So as you saw, my staff is pretty big. There's about 20 of us that are full-time, and some of our data collectors are part-time. But yeah, it's busy. And to do research, you have to have money to fund it. So through CAP and Educare, we have a contract where they pay us to do the research. But say like me as a researcher, if I want to come up with a new idea and research it, I have to write a proposal to a granting agency to get money to do that study. So like something I'm always thinking about is pushing out the studies we're doing now, but also like, how am I going to get money to fund the next thing down the line that we want to do?
Thank you.
Any more questions before we go? All right, I almost called you Diane. Dr. Horn, thank you so much. This was so good. I can't wait to get the students' responses and their reflections. Just, we're gonna ask, how they can use the information and just some of the key things that stood out. I would definitely say for me, just the importance of early childhood and the work that we do. And I know sometimes, depending on where you go and, your exposure, sometimes it feels like, oh, well, I just like kids, so I'm just gonna go in a classroom because I like babies. But the work that we do is really so much more important than that. I'm always saying, guys, we're like brain scientists. We are responsible for shaping the brain. And you see that it's not just something that I say loosely, but there's actual research to back up the impact that we have on children and their development. So I hope, if nothing else, you've gotten just how important it is, the work that you do and the power of your impact. So thank you, students, for being here, for being engaged, and for your thoughtful questions. And Diane, thank you so much for the work that you're doing to really highlight the importance of what we're doing in the classroom and in the workforce. So.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the chance to try to share my enthusiasm for early childhood research. And I agree with you, Amisha. Early childhood has a better research base to support what we do than any other level of education. So we should feel proud and like vindicated of our work. We should not like shrink about, oh, I'm just an early childhood educator. Right. We should say, I'm an early childhood educator and I have research to back up what I do. And I just want to once more like to put the seed in your brain. Think about becoming an early childhood researcher. It's an exciting career. It's a growing career, and we need people representing diverse communities. So it's a great time to become an early childhood researcher.
And Diane, what is the, I couldn't remember, for a research associate, they can come in with a bachelor's degree, or do they need a master's degree?
So our beginning step on our career ladder at the Early Childhood Education Institute is a bachelor's degree in a field related to early childhood. Mm-hmm. And then, so we have data collectors, and then the next step up would be like a project director. And many of our project directors have master's degrees, because what you would do as a project director is you would organize data collectors on a specific project and supervise their work and check their work. And then we have research scientists who have PhDs, and they're the ones who like think up the design of the studies and look for money for studies. And then I'm the director, so I try to keep everything going in the same direction.
So if you guys are interested, in that and looking for opportunities, they are based in Tulsa. And I just happen to know the people there. So definitely let me know for those of you getting ready to graduate, if that's something that you want to do. We have a couple of people, I think about Corey in particular. She's a psychology major, but she does have an interest in working with young children. And so that may be of interest to her, but others too. And Diane, just as a sidebar, I was wondering if, and I don't think you do this, but if at any point you guys would think about internship opportunities for students, because that could be another avenue of, getting our students exposed to research, but that could be a separate conversation.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, but I would be open to the idea.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else before we let Dr. Horn go?
Well, thanks for your interest and your great questions. I enjoyed it.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye,
Amisha.
y'all. Be
Thank
safe. Have a
you.
good day.
Bye. I see you with the piece. Hi.